Hello, GoldSilver family. Alan Hibbard here with another video. And today I want to go through some of your viewer questions and comments that are pretty much specifically targeted at me, not Mike. So I've got about 5 or 6 of them. I think you're really going to enjoy it. So let's dive in. First, we have one from Miss Libertarian. I love the name, by the way. She says, I couldn't watch. Okay. This was on a recent video I did talking about gold, silver, and Bitcoin. I hope you can watch this video. Okay. I'm going to go through your comment, address it one step at a time. I think we can see eye to eye here and get some common ground. She says Bitcoin is not a store of value in the monetary sense. Okay. It is a bucket to transfer values. I guess that's sounding more like a currency, and thus a utility software program. Not sure what that means necessarily in a monetary sense. Not a commodity from the table of elements, which is what it is forever. Okay, I agree. Obviously, Bitcoin is not on the periodic table of elements. So she says not a commodity from the table of elements. Okay, I mean, there are tons of commodities that are not elements. Lumber, corn, soybeans, orange juice, right? Those aren't elements, but they're definitely commodities. Okay, gold and silver are also commodities, and I would argue Bitcoin is a commodity, but it's not on the periodic table of elements. That's okay. That shouldn't be weird. Plenty of commodities are not elements. So I think it's a commodity. Anyways, the market isn't using it, Bitcoin, as a currency. I agree with you, and I actually have some evidence of that, let alone a perennial store of value now. That's actually where I disagree. I do think it's a store of value, and I have some evidence of that. Bitcoin has no texture, color, taste, malleability, or weight. I agree. It does not have those things. It is an idea recorded in electrons that have no real use of their own. I'm not sure if she's saying that the electrons have no use of their own, plural, or if an idea has no use of its own, singular. Anyways, the use of the electrons is recording the idea, and the use of the idea is, on her own admission, transferring values. So, not sure what to make of that sentence. I think there is utility. That's okay. Electrons depicting digits are fleeting in comparison to gold, of course, right? Everything digital is going to live a lot shorter period of time than gold will. No question about it. Honest money must have weight. Bold claim. I'm not sure why, other than gold and silver obviously do have weight. Why must all honest money have weight? Why? I don't know why. Bitcoin is worth its weight in silver or gold. All right, obviously that's zero. So, okay, I did say I have some evidence about nobody's using Bitcoin as a currency. That's true. And that's a really important point because despite being called a cryptocurrency, Bitcoin is not a currency, and I don't think it ever will be. I think it's a store of value. So let's actually look at that. There's a whole bunch of examples of companies that started accepting Bitcoin as payment, right, as a currency, and then stopped. So, lack of interest. Freelance market Fiverr drops Bitcoin payments. Freelancer marketplace Fiverr has discontinued Bitcoin payments, citing a lack of interest. Okay, and this is a very common theme. Companies think, oh, people are going to want to pay in Bitcoin, and then people don't want to pay in Bitcoin because once you hold it, you don't want to get rid of it. You'd rather pay in fiat. And that's an example of Gresham's law. It's a topic for another day. Many of you already know what that is. Another example, Michael Dell of Dell Computers is bullish on blockchain, unsure about Bitcoin. So in mid 2014, his company accepted Bitcoin payments through a partnership with Coinbase. However, Dell stopped accepting Bitcoin in October 2017 due to low demand. So people didn't want to spend their Bitcoins. Okay, common theme. Steam, the video game platform company, is no longer supporting Bitcoin. As of today, Steam will no longer support Bitcoin as a payment method on our platform due to high fees and volatility in the value of Bitcoin. So a slightly different issue, but because of high fees, in this particular case, people don't want to spend their Bitcoin. So multiple reasons people don't want to spend their Bitcoin. And one more here, Tesla stops taking Bitcoin for vehicle purchases, citing environmental harm. And that's after just 49 days after announcing that they would start taking Bitcoin. So Environmental harm, this is a dubious reason. I think this is more of a politically given reason. I'm not going to get into it in this video, but there's a lot of reasons why this doesn't quite add up as a legitimate reason. One obvious one is that after 49 days, the impact of Bitcoin on the environment didn't meaningfully change. So if it was harmful to the environment after 49 days, it was also harmful to the environment at the beginning of 49 days. So there's a lot of other reasons why this is bad logic. We can do it in another video, but I don't totally buy this reason. But the point here for today is that Bitcoin is not a currency. That's the point. I think we can all agree on that. Companies are not accepting it and people don't want to spend it as payments. So getting back to this point here, the market is not using it as a currency. Agree, let alone a perennial store of value now. Disagree. I think there's evidence that people are using Bitcoin as a store of value. I'm one of them, right? I've held gold and Bitcoin both for 10 years. And the market, the free market, not just me, is holding Bitcoin for increasingly longer periods of time. And that's what this chart here shows. These are the Bitcoin hodl waves or holding waves, how long people are holding Bitcoin. And these beautiful colors here show you how long any given Bitcoin has stayed in a certain wallet address. So if it's staying in a particular wallet, it's not being spent as a currency. It's being held as a store of value. Someone's holding it for a long period of time. And you can see the key along the bottom. So the purples and the blues up at the top of the screen, those are long periods of time. So that's a growing number, the height here. The growing thickness or height vertically indicates that more people are holding Bitcoins for longer and longer periods of time. The reds and oranges are really short holding periods, like 24 hours or up to a week. And you can see that, if something were being used as a currency, people would be getting it and spending it. Think about after you get your paycheck, how quickly you spend on rent and groceries and just the other things you buy. You might spend it the day you get your paycheck or within a couple days or a week, probably the majority of what you get. At least that's how most people are. So if you're going to spend Bitcoins as a currency, we would see that almost all of them would be red and orange. But we don't really see that. It's kind of like the same amount throughout Bitcoin's entire life, right? And that's really the amount that's traded on exchanges, probably in exchange for dollars and other fiat currencies, not really what people are using on payments, right? They're not buying a cup of coffee or groceries or anything like that. So I totally agree. There's no evidence that Bitcoin is being used as a currency. On the contrary, there's a ton of evidence it isn't being used as a currency and is being used as a store of value. Our next comment, is all the Bitcoin ever mined really worth all the silver ever mined? And that's a great question. If we look at today, this is live, no. All the Bitcoin ever mined is worth about 2.31 trillion. All the silver, 2.38 trillion. So as of today, all the silver ever mined is worth more than all the Bitcoin ever mined. And of course, gold is at the top of the list. But there's a screenshot from like 4 or 5 months ago where there was a point in time where Bitcoin was worth more than silver by market cap. So I don't know if market cap is the best way to answer your question, right? Is all the Bitcoin ever mined worth more than all the silver ever mined? I don't know how else somebody would even answer that question other than market cap. So if you have some other way of answering it, use that metric and look up the numbers, and there you go. Zigbeed says, gold not scalable? Not true. Of course, gold can be made into equally small and large coins and bars. Why do you say it cannot be scalable, Alan? ALAN, by the way, but it's okay. It's okay. So, of course, gold can be made into equally small and large coins and bars. Yeah, of course. Of course, we can change up the size and so forth. So why do I say that gold cannot be scalable? Okay. It's not so much cannot, but is not. And secondly, I say because scalable is not a question of a binary choice. Either something is or is not scalable. That's not it. Scalability falls along a spectrum. Okay, so it can be very lowly scalable or very highly scalable or somewhere in the middle. And I think in the case of gold, yes, you can split it up into small, large pieces. That's fine. However, you can split up $1 or let's say $100 into much smaller denominations more easily. It's much easier to make change. And if you don't want to do that with paper dollars, you can do digital dollars, which is, of course, even more scalable than that. And what this looks like visually is layered money. And this is a graphic from episode 5 of my upcoming series, Hidden Secrets of Value. By the way, that's coming really soon, like in a matter of weeks, guys. So I'm so excited. And here's what it looks like. The base layer of the pyramid is gold. And I would argue it's not very scalable. And because it's so lowly scalable, that's why the other layers exist. If it were just as easy to move gold around as it was to move dollars, dollars never would have been invented. There would have been no reason to create a paper promise to receive the gold. But these are lightweight. You can carry more of them in your pocket, and you can just add a couple extra zeros, and it doesn't require any additional weight in your pocket. So that makes them more scalable. If you want to carry these across the world, it's much easier. And of course, if you have a digital version, moving digital ones around the globe is even easier than moving physical pieces of gold all over the world. So basically, as we go higher up in the layers of our monetary pyramid, we get more and more scalable forms of money or currency. But the problem is they're more and more likely to not be paid back because they're promises. So at the base layer is gold, and we invented banknotes, dollars, gold certificates as a promise to pay gold. And we invented them because they're more scalable and they're currencies. Then with computers, we created bank deposits. And a bank deposit, if you have $100 in your bank account, what is that? It's just digits, it's electrons, it's nothing. Well, it's a promise that if you go to the ATM, you can take out $100 worth of physical banknotes. So it's a promise to pay banknotes. And then once you have those banknotes, you can say, all right, I'd like to redeem these for gold before 1971. And of course, we have credit cards, any form of credit. What is that? If you swipe a credit card to buy your groceries, that's a promise that you're going to pay bank deposits later. So the credit card company will pay your grocer right now with made up currency, but you're promising to pay bank deposits to your credit card company later. So it's a promise to pay all the way down. And these are all currencies, layer 2 and higher, and gold is layer 1 money. Hopefully that clarifies things. Daniel Woolman says, gold, silver, Bitcoin, my 3 favorite assets after many years of diligent research. Me too, Daniel. That's my entire portfolio. It's gold, silver, Bitcoin. But I didn't include this just because I agree with you. I actually included this comment because of the replies below it. Couple of replies here. Ken says, can Bitcoin go to 0 next week? Yes. Genius Opus says, at least 2 of them won't go to 0. I agree with you guys. Bitcoin can go to 0 next week, of course. And I do think Bitcoin will go to 0 eventually. I'm certain of it. However, I'm betting that it won't be next week. And in all likelihood, I don't think it'll be in my lifetime. But Bitcoin absolutely will go to 0. And part of the reason for that is the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic value, another theme from my upcoming series. So if you look at any form of money, really anything, it doesn't even have to be money. You could look at a wooden chair or a leather handbag. You could look at anything, and it has some amount of intrinsic value and some amount of extrinsic value. In the case of money, by virtue of being money, it has a greater amount of extrinsic value than it has intrinsic value. In other words, it has its entire intrinsic value plus a monetary premium. Okay? And that's why something is money. Or if it's money, it has that. Let's phrase it that way. However, if anything stops being used as money, its extrinsic value will fall to 0. And then the value of that thing will only be its intrinsic value. And what that looks like is this. So if something stops being used as money, such as a dollar, any fiat currency, or Bitcoin, its extrinsic value will shrink to 0, and it will only have its intrinsic value to fall back on. In the case of the dollar and Bitcoin, it's 0. That's true. It's 0. So the dollar will go to 0 someday. Bitcoin will go to 0 someday. No question. And if gold or silver stopped being used as money, they would fall back to their intrinsic value, which isn't 0. It's something. I don't know what it is or how many dollars worth, but it's something. It's meaningful. And we've actually seen that with silver. When silver stopped being used as money, it lost a lot of its value, right? And gold stopped acting like money right after the 1980s. For 20 years, gold lost 70% of its value, but at no time did it ever lose its intrinsic value, right? Gold or silver. So yeah, absolutely. I think Bitcoin's definitely going to go to zero, and gold and silver never will. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't touch them or that they're fundamentally a scam. If something is a scam, it's a scam for a completely different reason. So, anyways, that's what I've got. I hope you guys learned a ton in this video. I tried to pack in as much as I possibly could. If you have follow-up questions, please put them in the comment section. I absolutely love hearing what you guys have to say. So thank you so much. Stay tuned for Hidden Secrets of Value, and I will see you in the next video.